obviously for Eddie Van Halen's solo, I think it's one of his finest. It has so many different textures and techniques and just makes so much sense. Um, of all the solos out there, I'm glad that's the one that I got to cover.
Today, Planet Guitar has the pleasure of talking to guitarist Jennifer Batten. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thanks for having me.
How are things in LA?
I escaped LA 20 years ago. I live in Portland, Oregon now,
Oh, right.
and it's great. The weather is just amazing.
Last time we spoke, you were touring with a Michael Jackson tribute band. And in 2019, you started with Rodrigo Teaser, I believe.
Yeah.
Um, how do you go about creating a show that's different to the other Michael Jackson tribute shows?
I'm actually not any part of the creation of, I just come in as a guest and generally play half a dozen songs. Um, so Rodrigo, gosh, I don't know exactly when he started. He's been doing it for quite a number of years. And for some reason, it's in the water in Brazil. There's such amazing musicians in Brazil. The two best tributes that I played with come from Brazil. And they just, to have a great show, you got to have great musicians as the foundation. And then, as Michael did, you got to add all the wow factor on top of it with special effects and video, LED screens, and just hit people with new exciting things every 5 minutes. And they managed to do that. And it is not easy. I mean, putting a show together like that is not something you do in a weekend or a week. So I just the beneficiary of having that in my resume. I can just pop in and jump into different tributes. However, they all do the songs in different keys and different formats. So I always have to have an iPad going, okay, Beat It is in C sharp tonight. Don't forget this.
How are these shows being received?
Really well. It's so many, obviously the younger people that come to see the show never got a chance to see Michael. So that's as close as they're going to get to diving into Wonderland. And it seems to make people really happy, and people get really emotional. I've seen people crying. We do Man in the Mirror and people just break down and cry, whether just the emotion of the music or whether it's close enough to Michael that they really believe they're there. It's a good thing.
Beat It came out in around 1982, and I've read that you've been playing it since about that time. How do you keep it fresh?
That solo is a challenge, and it kicks my ass. I have to try to dominate it every night. There's certain things in that solo with harmonics that need to pop out that sometimes they don't. And if it's, if I go for that one thing and it doesn't happen that night, that I'm just bummed. It's like, damn it. So, I have a lot of respect for the song, and obviously for Eddie Van Halen's solo. I think it's one of his finest. It has so many different textures and techniques and just makes so much sense. Of all the solos out there, I'm glad that's the one that I got to cover. And honestly, that 16 bars bought me a house.
Yes, I read that. You did, of course, 3 Michael Jackson tours. I believe that after the bad one, you then bought your studio, or created your first studio. Is that right?
Yeah, I was able to buy a house and I converted the garage into a studio. It was, I mean, gosh, what a blessing to go from, I think I was playing in 7 different bands in Hollywood and just hoping to be seen, and everybody was trying to get a record deal at that time. And just to be elevated from teaching 7 days a week and being in 7 different bands, boom! It's really like a paid vacation joining Michael. Everything was first class. It was more money I ever made in my life. It was just a wonderful way to see the world.
Talking about your studio, do you have any special photos or keepsakes there on the walls?
I do. This is not my studio behind
No.
me. Yeah, I've got some great pictures of Jeff Beck me with Jeff Beck and Billy Gibbons, and I've got pictures of me with Michael at the Super Bowl. The walls change all the time, so unless I'm in there, I couldn't tell you what's on the walls.
Okay. And in terms of what you've got around, in terms of the instruments you have, do you have a Washburn Parallax in the corner, or what guitars do you have there?
Yeah, I've been using the Parallax for quite a while, and honestly, I recently took it in to get a fret job, and I got it back, and it was absolutely unplayable. They took so much metal off that I can't get my fingers under the strings. And I had purchased a John Suhr guitar maybe 6 months ago, and it's just so different. I like to have one guitar, and that's my thing, and I get used to it. So any other guitar, even the same model but a different guitar, is just kind of off-putting. And when I first started playing the Suhr, I thought, gosh, I don't have this and I don't have that. But because my Washburn was so screwed up, I really took to the Suhr. I really dug in and started playing it. And honestly, the 2 and 4 position, like a Strat, is much better with the Suhr. And I didn't think it was possible with a 24 fret because you can't get the Stratocaster fret spacing. But Suhr came as close as you can get, I think.
After playing with Michael Jackson, you recorded 2 albums with Jeff Beck, Guitar Heaven for most people, I think. You're one of the world's leading guitar players. What did you learn from playing with him?
Oh gosh, he was such a transcendent player. We never sat around trading licks or being like a typical guitar nerd. We didn't talk about gear much. The thing I learned about him is listening. I often joke that he could sit there and listen to Ornette Coleman and the Spice Girls back to back, and he would glean something from each of them. Where I remember watching like the British Idol or whatever they had on TV 20 years ago with all the different singers coming on, and he would listen to it. I would be sitting next to him watching TV, and he'd listen to it, and he'd be swearing at it, and just like, ah. But he would pick up things that I didn't pick up, whether it was a snare EQ or some little thing that he would glean onto that was really fascinating. So just hanging out with him for many, many hours in the studio and on the bus listening to music, boy, there was just always a piece of gold every day. I go, that just opened up my eyes. The way he thinks. Like he said, if the drums are great, the groove is great, you don't need much else. I mean, that's such a Zen thing to say, where most of us guitar players are trying to show all our shit all the time.
Uh,
You got one album, the second album, where do you go from there? Because you already laid it all out. But he's the kind of guy that only typically puts in what's needed. And the choices he makes and the little nuances that he honed over the decades just still slay me. He'll go to unpredictable places that, he pulls you along in the story rather than giving you an onslaught of licks. He just had a magical thing, was connected to some other thing.
you toured Italy together. Was there any special concert which stands out in your mind?
Yeah. That was the first that we toured, was in Italy. And we did a bunch of dates. But I think it was Sardinia. The concert was right on the beach, and to me, it was just so magical. If I ever felt I arrived somewhere, it was that night. I'm on the beach in the summer in Italy on stage with Jeff Beck. And, I can't tell you any more than that, but that night felt absolutely magical to me.
Of course, he passed away very recently. How will you remember him?
Boy, I don't think I could put it into words, honestly. I got turned on to him when I was probably 13 or 14, when they had the Blow by Blow tracks playing on the radio. And there was just something that grabbed me, and he's been my favorite guitar player ever since. to the point where I got super OCD about it. And at one point, I actually, when I was at guitar school, which is it's called MI now, but it was Guitar Institute of Technology when I went. It was the third class they ever had. We all had an assignment to transcribe something, a song and a solo, and play it with a band. And one of my classmates, Steve Lynch, played "Cause We Ended as Lovers," and everybody else pretty much was trying to be a jazz player or fusion. Larry Carlton or Lee Ritenour, Al Di Meola were big at the time. George Benson, and Steve was the resident rocker, and he played the snot out of that song, and that got to me big time. There was another fellow classmate who's recently passed named Jesse Gress that he did a Jan Hammer song. And, Jeff was very influenced by Jan Hammer and the way the keyboard was very guitaristic. And just from watching Jesse play with a Strat with a tremolo bar, I go, God, what am I doing? What am I doing with this arch top? I must have a tremolo bar. Um, Yeah, I'm going off the rails here. I don't even know if I'm on the
I
original
know.
question.
I'm happy to talk about GIT. Of course, Jeff Buckley and John Frusciante and Chad Smith have all been GIT. Were you contemporaries with any of them?
No, no, I was in the third class they ever had. I graduated in 1979, so it was very, very early days, and they've moved into, I think, two buildings since I graduated.
I think you met jazz guitarist Joe Dorio there, who said you were. I think you said he was the biggest influence of your career. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess it's parallel with Jeff, honestly. I mean, Joe was a bebopper,
Uh,
and when before I joined the school, I went up for a weekend symposium they had, and most of the stuff was over my head because I only knew pentatonic scales and basic chords, and um, all these jazz guys were talking about theory and substitutions, and I'm like, ugh, I have no idea what this is all about. But at the end of the symposium, they all played, and Joe played, and it just really grabbed me. Just like listening to Jeff, there's something fresh here. There's something so different from the other players. I kind of glommed on to him during the school year. I memorized one of his books, well, several of his books actually, because I was just really into how fresh it sounded. And I think going back to what I forgot to say earlier, I was so into Jeff that I memorized Blow by Blow and Wired, all of the tunes and solos. And I would play along with the record and just learned so much from doing that. Just, you know, you most of your early career, you're just input, 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 input. And eventually it filters through you and hopefully becomes your own voice. But there's a lot of Beck influence. And having said that, I learned a lot of solos. I learned, from Pat Martino to Van Halen to George Lynch, Robin Ford. I used to take certain players and I would take all of their solos from their records and play them back to back, record them back to back. So it's like eating fudge for dinner. Just only the solos, get past the vocals, right to the solos. So there's a huge amount of influence from a lot of different players, but I think the guys that resonated most, Jeff Beck and Joe DiOrio, for different reasons.
having had all this incredible success, a lot of musicians, as you know, tend to overindulge. Um, how did you keep yourself grounded during those years?
Oh, overindulge. I thought you meant playing too many notes. um, it's kind of funny. I dabbled in drinking when I was in my late teens, and going to GIT for me was like joining the army, and it's okay, it's time to get serious. And I stopped drinking when I turned 21. So, but I don't know. I was never attracted to. In my teen years, I smoked weed, but I got over it. And right now, it just puts me to sleep. Now that it's legal, it just does nothing for me, sadly. Um, But I will say 3 years with Jeff Beck, I drank more alcohol in those 3 years than I have in my whole life. It was just one long party of fun. And I often say that my liver said thank you after those years were over. Because I don't know, I guess certain people have a propensity for it, or, if you're in a band, then that's all they do. I imagine if I was in Jeff's band for 10 or 15 years, I probably would have, being in that atmosphere, I probably would have drank a lot more than I did not being in it.
What do you put it down to? Your groundedness? Do you put it down to your family values or?
Sure. Yeah, yeah, the way I was raised, the people I've been around, my friends. Yeah.
Cool. Aside from music, of course, you've been involved in stained glass making and steampunk designs. Are these still your passions?
I haven't done this in quite a while, but I was super obsessed with it for 3 solid years. And I ended up with 3 kilns in the garage of different sizes. And I was always thinking of the next design, next design. I started, when I left LA 20 years ago, I made enough money selling my house that I was able to take almost a year off. And I just took classes and went to shows and craft shows and concerts and plays. And um, it was a really wonderful creative break. And I really took to stained glass. And then it turned into fused glass. And then I started firing beads and, just discovering all this different visual art. It's a very expensive hobby, and I always intended to sell a bunch of it, and I did sell almost all of it, but it doesn't keep up with the money you put into it, like many hobbies. And the steampunk stuff, I haven't had time. My favorite thing is if I actually have a month free, and I would not feel guilty just working on wacky stuff like fantasy airships made out of toilet bulbs, that toilet float, the copper ones make a great airship.
I was going to ask you actually because there are various strands to steampunk. There's the art and design, there's the fashion, there's the literature. Is there one angle that you're particularly drawn towards, or is it the whole genre?
It's so wild. It's just like glass. I have no idea how it got into my consciousness. It just feels like I woke up one day and I must have gears. I don't know where it came from. It's like an implant during my sleep. The visual more than anything, like the goggles, the whole look. I have a local band in Portland. It's called Jennifer Batten at Full Steam, and we all dress in steampunk gear. And there's just something super intriguing about it. It's not related to music, and I don't read steampunk stuff. But if that genre is in a movie, I am particularly engaged in the visuals of what I'm looking at.
Do you have any other creative passions that we don't know about?
Uh, Not really, no. Uh-uh.
Interior design?
Music is so full time.
Yeah.
It's just if I get a lot of sessions, I do recording at home, and it seems like I'm always going into the studio to prep for the next thing, next thing, next thing. And there's always a million tunes to learn. I just did the Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp in LA, and there's 15 tunes to learn for that. There's the Council Jam tunes, and then there's the tunes that the campers that pay to be there need to play. So that was a hell of a lot of work.
Are you happiest on stage or at home, maybe with your cats, or working on your creative projects?
There has to be a balance. When I'm on the road, I always bitch about it. I want to be home. I've been over flying for 10 years and been trying to travel less, and then COVID hit. Be careful what you wish for, right? So then getting out after that was really nice. I as far as being on stage, it really depends on the environment and the music and the situation. Um, I think the worst thing you can do as a creative person is be on stage just because it pays money. you know, and you're not really engaged in a creative thing. Um, but I've been fortunate the last few years, almost everything I've done, I've really dug the people, the other musicians that I'm around. Um, it's super fun. Um, so I can't say stage versus home. I do love being home, but I do get itchy too because I've been doing it so long, just in and out of the country constantly, that if you're out too long, you think all I want to do is be home. People ask where I would go for vacation, and say my back porch. That's where I would go because it seems like I've been everywhere.
Can we expect any more solo material from you in the future?
I think not unless I get a sugar daddy. Honestly, it takes so much time and effort and money, and everybody gets your material for free now. So there's absolutely no return. And what other business model can you think of that we'll just put a lot of effort and money into something that brings you nothing? I mean, it's a lot of people still do it. They're still drawn to do it and work in their social media. And I do love recording, but unless something is approached to me, like that, the last project I did was kind of fun. It's called the Share. What the hell is it called? I guess it's just called Share Batten, the vocalist Mark Share. I was hired to do sessions, and I flew to Chicago and did 3 or 4 songs, and then they wanted more. And finally, Mark called me up and said, your guitar is like another voice on the record, so I want you to be a bigger part of it. So that was the most painless record project I've ever done because I didn't know I was doing it. It's like all the hard decisions were made. I just came in and decorated and had fun on top. But doing a solo project is, oh God. I like the model that a lot of people are doing now is just do one tune, put it up on iTunes, and it's not as painful as trying to do so many tracks and all the millions of little decisions that happen. But there again, put it up on iTunes, you make 50 cents a year, so it doesn't make sense.
No. You've got a few concerts coming up as part of your European tour with the Michael Jackson tribute now. What else do you have planned for the rest of the year?
Uh, I started saving the summer, July and August, for my local band. We're doing 80s covers. I got great players, great singers. So that's fun. A lot of outdoor concerts and festivals. And then in September, I'm back on the road. My year is not entirely filled up, but I've got a lot of things penciled in to jump around the planet, and a really exciting potential tour that I can't even talk about.
Oh no! Please share it with us.
It's too early. The days are too early to announce.
Well, we really look forward to that, Jennifer. Thank you so much for talking to us today and finding the time.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Good luck.
All right. Thanks. Bye.